Dana Davenport, and welcome to Finding Common Ground, where we focus on important current events and how they impact our diverse population. We are many voices of one community, often with strong opinions on every side of an issue.
And I'm Rebecca Malatke-Meslin. In this episode, we're sitting down with business owners, elected officials, and community members to talk about all that has transpired since businesses reopened at the end of July. Some think the current restrictions put in place by Governor Pritzker and the Restore Illinois plan don't go far enough, while others think the measures threaten our economy and our freedoms. Here, through courageous conversations, in the interest of discovering collaborative solutions, we hope to find our common ground.
Joining us now are Gabriela Trejo, one of the co-owners of Paris Bistro in Naperville, and Dr. Mimi Cowan, Will County Speaker of the Board, District 11. Thank you, ladies, so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Gabriela, how is your restaurant business and other local businesses, how have they been faring 6 months into the COVID pandemic?
It's been really bad for most of us. Restaurant business and any other business that are around our restaurant, it's affecting a lot because people doesn't go out. They are not allowed to go and buy stuff until they start reopening us. The only thing that make us survive is the curbside, but it's not the same. As much as we wanted to have the business open, no, it's not the same, but we try. We have a lot of support from our community, to be honest. They've been very supportive. They try to order as much as they can, and that's pretty much what it makes us go through the reopening.
So you're saying curbside is a strong part of your business right now?
It was before we opened.
Yeah.
It was before we opened. Now, once we open, it slows down a little bit. And it's only when it's raining or it depends on the weather. Sometimes the weekends it's better, but yeah, it's not the same.
What percentage of your business would you say is curbside?
Oof. The percentage will be like probably 10%.
10%? Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay.
What are some of the measures that you've had to take to ensure that your staff and your patrons are able to be safe when they're dining at your restaurant?
Even before the pandemic, you gotta take care of your customers because their life is on your hands. Not only the customers, your employees as well, and your family. We already have that before the pandemic. Okay. Now with the pandemic, the only thing we can do is increase everything. Like I told everybody, I told my employees, call me the clean girl, because that's pretty much what I say all the time. Clean, that's what we need to do. But I mean, there's something that we used to do before, because like I say, everybody's life is in our hands.
Mm-hmm. How have other businesses that you're familiar with, Mimi, been impacted?
Well, I think this is a story we've heard repeated from a lot of local businesses. Obviously, at the beginning, many businesses, especially retail organizations as well as restaurants, were deeply affected by the initial pretty strict shutdowns, and that has relaxed somewhat. But I think restaurants are really still one of the most struggling industries, and along with tourism and hospitality, I think those are two other areas that are still really feeling some struggles. And those struggles aren't divorced from the reality that we face as elected officials and having to make decisions, because that's where tax revenue comes from as well. So it's not just having empathy for our business owners, which of course we do, but there's a real bottom line, not just for the business owners, but for our community as a whole, that we really have to make sure we're balancing all of these different things. We need everyone to be safe. We need everyone to be healthy so that they're there to enjoy dining out and travel and all those things. But we also need to make sure that we're supporting our economy.
It's true.
So, what are you hearing most from business owners in terms of if they're reaching out for help from the county? What kinds of things are you hearing from them?
Well, I think most business owners are looking for a way to make sure that, like Gabriela said, that their employees and their customers are safe, because they know that is in the long term the real focus of their business. If they can't provide a safe environment for their customers, whether it's Home Depot or Paris Bistro, they know that they have to provide that for their customers. So there's a lot of questions about how, especially at first, a lot of questions about how do we make people safe? How do we keep people safe?
I wanted to ask the clean the clean girl. Have you had any instances of COVID reported at your restaurant?
Not restaurant right now.
So taking some of those precautions, taking those measures, pays off.
Yes.
By keeping people safe, which I think is great. So thank you for all that you do to keep people safe. You and other restaurants out there that really take the restrictions seriously and enforce them. What has surprised you and your staff and patrons most about how well you've handled the pandemic and your response to it?
Like you say at the beginning, they clean, like they're thank us all the time because they see the place is clean. We're caring about handle the things. We're washing our hands. We have sanitizer all over. We have the sanitizer bottle for the tables, the doors. We actually do the doors most of the time as much as we can because it's a touching stuff. So then we clean the doors. The bar area where people came and pick up their food, so we clean that as much as we can as well. And that's pretty much what we try to do. The only problem we have had is when people don't want to wear their mask.
Right.
So that's the only problem. But I mean, they don't want to wear their mask, sorry, but they have to leave.
How does that affect your employees? Because I think we've heard a lot about people not following that guideline, and there's that worry that you have young employees, possibly kids who are in high school or college, being confronted by an adult who doesn't want to wear their mask, and there can be conflict. Has there been situations like that at your restaurant?
Oh yeah. So I have a customer that walk through the restaurant, going through the bathroom, and say, "I don't have a mask. You can call the police." And walk through the bathroom. And then my son and I, we tried to catch him, but he get into the bathroom. So I wait for him at the door. So because we had 3 doors, and then the one that goes in the bathroom, so he can get out from there, so and not cross the restaurant without the mask. So I waited for him there, and then when he came out, so he's like, I told him, "Sir, you cannot go through here." And he's like, "Why not?" And I'm like, "Because those are the guidelines." And he pushed my hand, and I think the noise of the glasses kind of like backed him up because he was a little boss. So then he's like, "You guys are crazy. The government is crazy, and you guys are nuts." And then but we made him leave. And my son goes to the table and says, "Sir, you had to close your tab and leave."
You know, and I think that's a really unfortunate part of this whole thing too, right? That, you know, if we want to support our business owners, we should have enough respect for them and their employees that if a business owner or a staff person says to you politely, "You need to put on a mask," to not be a jerk about it to their face. You're only making their job harder.
Right.
You know, if you have your own personal opinions about whether it works or not, that's up to you. But when you're in somebody else's establishment, presumably there to support them, and I'm sure you're saying, "Oh, we need to support our economy," let's at least be human and decent to each other about that moment and accept that this is tough for everyone.
Right.
And that I think we all need to show an extra level of grace and kindness to one another. And support.
It's important. It's so important.
Well, and for those folks who are out, and we've talked about this a lot, that are out and are wearing their masks, and they see others that aren't, and they start to feel unsafe, they're not going to patronize those businesses. They're going to step back and step away, which then has another effect, right? That rolling effect of negativity on businesses, because even the patrons who you do want to see who are following the rules then get scared away, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And there's a ripple effect, because if there's those people don't come to patronize the businesses make less money.
Right.
And then all of the people who rely on the businesses being fully stocked, fully at capacity, all of your suppliers, who you work with. So there's just a domino effect and that can come from just a few people not wanting to wear a mask, or just kind of that beginning, and it just trickles all the way
Right.
down.
And I think a lot of people are talking about restaurants as though they're this standalone entity that is unaffected by other, right? And so I think we have to all be thinking about how it isn't just about, I want to go out to eat, right? The fact that I'm coming to your business means that I'm also helping those supplier businesses, right? The people that are supplying linens to businesses, the people that are supplying the vegetables to businesses.
That's right.
And when they don't have that business, those are also suffering in that space. So it isn't just about going out to eat. I think we have to think about it as that web of the economy. And a lot of times we don't think about those things. We don't think about how that it's being impacted.
Well, and you make an excellent point, and I kind of mentioned this earlier, but to that point, Naperville relies on taxes from restaurant and bar sales for a huge part of the budget. And nobody wants to see higher property taxes.
Right.
So we have to make sure we're still getting that tax revenue from restaurants and bars. And it will affect, at a certain point, city services and county services. And I think that's part of the reason early on in this, Mayor Cherico and a lot of the city council members and allied people and organizations really pushed hard on, hey, everybody, order takeout, get curbside. And I think they had a hashtag about it and everything. And, they're cognizant of what these small businesses mean to our economy. Like you said, it's not just Gabriella's restaurant. It's not just Gabriella's restaurant and employees. It's actually quite a large web. We're all interconnected in this.
Very much so. And I hope that people can see more of their part and more of their role in it.
Definitely.
I think that's important. Are you getting pushback from business owners?
Yep.
Yeah?
Sure.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. In what way? Tell us more about that.
Well, the county is not there to, we're not the ones who are making the rules.
Right.
Yeah.
But the health department does have the responsibility to enforce the rules to a certain degree. So, the pushback we've heard is more concern about maybe how the numbers are being calculated and wanting them to be calculated a different way, or, just general pushback against this, someone's opinion that these mitigation factors don't help or something. And my response to that is, well, let's give this a shot. And if this doesn't work, we can try something else.
Right.
But, this is a new territory for all of us, including the public health officials. And I do really believe that everyone is trying their best to do the right thing. And I know for some small business owners, their best is trying to keep their business afloat.
Right.
So I have to respect that feeling and that concern for them too. But this is where we're at right now.
Yeah.
And so I think it would behoove us all to try to get the train back on the tracks. So,
What have you seen in terms of businesses closing? Has there been, I think we're hearing and seeing some businesses that have shut their doors. I felt like there was a little more of an uptick right when COVID hit, maybe a couple of months ago. But I'm just curious what you've heard about that, or Gabriella, also what maybe you've seen in among your peer restaurants and community members.
Yeah, you can tell it's a lot of people that is being closing. A lot of restaurants, even our food vendors are the ones that are telling us, I lost so-and-so account, this area closed and this restaurant closed, and it's been brutal, very bad.
yeah, and I think I don't have the exact numbers of what kind of business loss we've seen, like permanent loss, but certainly throughout this whole thing, unemployment has been a big concern, right?
Yeah.
That businesses aren't open or aren't having the business that they normally had, so they have to lay off people or furlough people, whatever that is. And the unemployment numbers were pretty striking the first couple of months, but they have come down, and especially in the restaurant industry, there are people going back to work. And I know that one of the transitions we're actually seeing is that a lot of restaurant staff who haven't been hired back are actually switching to other industries for employment. And I don't really have whether that's good or bad, a quantifier on that, but I think there's some shifts in the labor market and we certainly want to get people employed. People want to work. That is definitely clear.
Yeah.
And so we want to make sure we have opportunities to give people.
And I think people are definitely pivoting.
Yeah.
And making changes. Do you think businesses won't survive the late fall and winter, given some of the limited capacity guidelines that we're under now?
I mean, I think it goes without question that we're going to lose some businesses.
Yeah.
We're going to permanently lose some businesses. My goal is to get our act together.
Get it together.
So that we can mitigate those losses, right? Because that's not just the economy, it's also somebody's dream.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
It's somebody's dream and it's somebody's baby, and none of us want to see that, right? But I think to that end, the federal government, the state government, and the local governments are doing some things to help. And if you don't mind my giving a little pitch for this.
Yeah.
So we have the CARES Act funding. And so that's the federal bill that was passed to help, well, it did a lot of things having to do with COVID, but one of the repercussions is that Will County received $121 million to distribute in the county to businesses, to organizations, to nonprofits, to local governments to help mitigate some of these financial challenges. DuPage County also received a substantial amount. It was based on population. If you had an area that was over 500,000, they got a chunk of the money. So both DuPage and Will qualified for this. And so we were able to start dispersing money to local governments, so to cover their COVID-related expenses. And our applications for small businesses are open now until the 28th, so not too much longer. We might do a second round. We think we will probably still have money left over, so we want to make sure all the businesses in the area have a chance to apply for those funds, and that helps sort of in the same way that the PPP was intended to help to offset COVID-related expenses, and then nonprofits and some other areas where that funding is going to go. And then also the state has the BIG grants, and I'm not as familiar with the details of those, but local business owners who are looking for support should definitely Google BIG grants Illinois. If you're in Will County and your business is in Will County, go to willcountyillinois.com/cares-act, and the applications are right there. We have some great partner organizations that have been helping us get the word out. Naperville Area Chamber, all the municipal chambers have been helpful. The Will County Center for Economic Development has been incredibly helpful. So we're really trying to push that message out and make sure we get to small business owners so that they know the assistance is out there.
That's good. That is so good. What are your hopes for the future of your business and some of the other businesses that are out there?
The business is there, and every single business is productive. The only thing is, like she say, with everybody cooperating and getting all together, so this can be successful. I keep telling my neighbors around the area, don't close. It doesn't matter if you guys make the minimum. Right. It doesn't matter. So just keep going and keep going and keep going. Because if you close, it's harder for you to reopen. That's right. Yep. If you stay open, even with the minimum that you have, you can stay open. That's what I think, and that's what I see.
Well, and similarly, it's the small businesses that make our community what it is, right? I live walking distance to Paris Bistro, and over there is Houlihan's too. Houlihan's is fine, that's great. Houlihan's is going to survive, right? But what makes our neighborhood special are places like Paris Bistro. Right. So my hope is that we can hold on to those small businesses and give them the support that they need in order to make it through this.
Wearing your mask.
That's right.
Getting your curbside.
That's right.
Wash their hands.
Yeah.
Use sanitizer.
Be polite, be kind, be supportive.
That too.
Yeah.
That's a lot of people. It has been though. Like seriously, we have a very nice community, and they help us a lot.
Well, thank you both so much for joining us and sharing your experiences. And we look forward to talking with a few more of our community members when we come back on the next segment of Finding Common Ground.
Wearing my mask is just part of my routine now. just like wearing my seatbelt.
Wearing a mask should be just as routine as brushing your teeth.
Wearing a mask for me has become as routine as that first cup of coffee in the morning.
As routine as checking my email.
I grab my mask every morning just like I grab my car keys.
Wearing a mask has been just as routine as putting on your shoes in the morning.
Wearing a mask has become as routine as going on a daily walk.
Just as routine as having dinner.
Wearing a mask is just as routine as having story time with my kids.
So make it part of your routine. Please mask up, Naperville.
Your voice, your vote. In our democracy, they matter. Make yours count. Get registered, learn the issues, and vote by or on November 3rd. Visit vote411.org. This message is furnished by the National Association of Broadcasters.
Want to get more eyes on your business while supporting Naperville's nonprofit TV station? Advertise on nctv17.com, which draws tens of thousands of viewers each week for the latest in local news, sports, and events. Or put an ad in NCTV 17 News Update, an email sent to thousands of subscribers every Monday through Friday. Visit nctv17.com/advertising for details.
Welcome back to Finding Common Ground. We have with us today two community members, Karen Peck and Josh McBroom. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you guys doing today?
Thank you.
Good. Thank you for inviting us.
So we're going to talk a little bit about the reopening, and we know that you guys have very different opinions about how Naperville and maybe the state of Illinois have reopened. So talk to us a little bit about how you think that Naperville and Illinois have fared in the last 6 months.
Well, I think Illinois has done considerably better than 2/3 of the states in the country. So, it's not great. We still had 540 deaths in DuPage alone. We're almost at 200,000 deaths countrywide.
Yeah.
But as far as Illinois is concerned, I think we're doing better than about 2/3 of the rest of the country.
Do you want to know what I think about Illinois?
Yes, we do.
So, common theme here. I've got to know Karen a little bit. I really like her, but we don't agree on anything, which is okay.
That's not true. We both like yoga.
That's right. Don't say that.
That's the next episode.
It's a cool thing to like.
That's your common ground. We'll start there. We'll start
We
there.
found common ground.
Common ground already.
Done.
We're good.
So,
We're good.
No, Illinois, I don't want to get into data tit for tat, but you can look at other states and you can see per capita death rates. I think especially in states that have had severe lockdown, like Illinois, you're not seeing a big a benefit or a risk reward benefit from like a neighboring state like a Wisconsin. I mean, if you look at per capita death and when you take into account excess deaths and all the other costs, and so people like myself who looked at this from the beginning and have continued to look at data and have still kind of scratched our head and say, hey, why are we continuing to be so aggressive on some of these measures? Because cost has never been really allowed to be a part of the discussion, in my opinion, or to a large degree. And financial devastation, obviously, that's one that everyone knows and can see. We're all going to pay for it. Even us that are considered essential businesses, which I've always hated that term, we're going to pay for that. But kids, mental health, suicide, depression, all those things. For me, I saw in the beginning, these things are coming, and I just think the risk-reward calculation, and I don't think so. There's a lot of deaths in Illinois. I don't think we've done a great job.
I think it's a matter of not confusing causation and correlation. This is an awful pandemic. The last one was 100 years ago. We have incredible stress on everybody. So it's going to cause people to be upset and lose work and feel isolated. I don't think it has to do with whether a state or a county is locked down, quote unquote, because we were never really locked. But it's a pandemic. The problem is coming from that. The isolation is coming from that. Suicide's a really key issue. It's important. Let's make sure we're addressing those needs in our community. But it's not coming from a lockdown. It's coming from the fact that people have relatives dying, people have worries about the uncertainty of living in this time. We are living in a really uncertain time.
Yeah.
We don't know what next month's going to look like. We don't know what next year's going to look like. So I think it's important not to say, oh, it's the way the governor is running this state or that state. A lot of the pain and a lot of the suffering has to do with the fact that we are dealing with a novel coronavirus.
Right. The only thing I would differ with you on that is I couldn't say that coronavirus caused unemployment. I can say that our public reaction to it did. Now, that doesn't mean we should have just let it go and we should have done nothing. But for me to say a pandemic caused this pain and suffering, whether you believe that the measures taken were the right thing to do or not, those measures were what caused it was the reaction to our fear, whether it was rational or not, to the pandemic that caused all that we can do a long list of.
Josh, what do you think? What do you think we've done well in Illinois?
Not a lot.
Really?
What data can we point to that says we've done better than a lot of these states that didn't have these harsh lockdowns? We're number 11, I think, on the per capita death.
We're closer to the bottom third, state by state.
Based on what metrics? Cases or?
Deaths per adjusted population.
Okay, well, we can look it up later. I just looked it up.
I just looked it up too.
Okay.
I'm sure you did.
We're number 11. But,
well, this has been a major point of contention, I think, for a lot of folks, both our government officials as well as our community members, that the way in which we're looking at data, right, and how we're interpreting that is being skewed in lots of different ways. And I think there's also a concern about where the source is coming from, how it's being reported out, how it might be used in a way to benefit some instead of others, and also in decision making. So I think that's a real frustration for everyone, because we'd like to point to data to just say, let's clear the air, let's make this a definitive decision, but it's being skewed and interpreted in all sorts of different ways.
Right.
So when we talk about, hindsight's 2020, but if we all were able to have a time machine and go back, let's talk about what you think should have been done differently, maybe at the very begining of all of this.
At the very beginning, the problem isn't so much what we did do, but what we didn't do as a country. There's an utter failure of leadership at the top. Downplaying, denying, lying, and we've heard recent information come out that this is something the leader knew and chose to keep from the people. And I've seen estimates that say just 7 weeks earlier would have saved literally tens of thousands of lives. So what should we have done? We should have locked down sooner. We should have not made mask wearing a political issue. I just read a statistic right before I came over that said we can avoid severe lockdown if 80% of the population will wear a mask.
And wear them correctly.
And wear it correctly, yes. And, Czech Republic, for example, was able to do this. China has mask usage. America has a different personality. Countries, just like people, have personalities. And our personality is very independent, very self-focused. And that is part of the problem. But what could have been done differently? We should have been mitigating this right away. It should have been at a national level, not relegated down to a state-by-state level where every state is doing something different. Their playbooks are all different. Had we had a national testing, tracing, and isolation campaign, national, clear, truthful information, I think we would not have been in this situation. We'd look more like the other...
Sweden?
Sweden is a poor example because there's a lot of misinformation going out there.
Okay, so
Sweden is not doing very well economically. Their mitigation methods, which were zero, did not save them economically. But you look at other countries who are first world countries, and they're way ahead of us. 200,000 deaths. We're going to be 400,000 by Christmas. It's unacceptable. Any death is unacceptable. But this was purposeful negligence. For political reasons.
What do you think you would have done differently?
The data's shown us now. We know who is susceptible, very susceptible to becoming very ill and death. We kind of knew that in the beginning. We have the data now. It is unprecedented to think that we would shut down, tell businesses you have to close, quarantine healthy people. It's never been done before in the history, maybe the 904, whatever the flu, but it is an unprecedented act. And why we didn't, now the major failure was nursing homes, right? I mean, Sweden, I think, depending on the data you look at, right? And like what Rebecca said, I think people are definitely fed up with, here's cherry-picked data, here's cherry-picked data. You know what? I'm done. I'm just going to live my life. I'm going to make choices that I think are safe for my family and myself. We have an election year. Obviously, you think there's politics involved. There certainly is, to a great degree. I would look at the states that still have severe lockdowns with no data. And I know we're not talking about school today, but I think it ties into the economy. I was talking to a friend today where he has employees that are quitting, or he can't get people to work because they have to stay home with their kids. Mm-hmm. Looking at in the spring, child abuse reporting cases were down 60%. What's happening? We know what's happening. People that aren't seeing these kids who normally report these things are not reporting them. Nutrition, the mental health of kids. That alone, you look at that, and it's undeniable to look at youth and say that they have any real risk of illness to this virus, and make them pay the price to what I see, so adults can feel safe.
Well, the problem is kids don't live in isolation. They go home to parents. They see grandparents. They are with their teachers. So if the virus is in the community, it will be in the schools.
Maybe.
And we've seen that at the universities now. A number of them, Georgia and North Carolina,
Wisconsin,
have opened, and they have thousands of cases now within 1 week.
Okay.
Now, and I'm not saying your idea of shutdown or lockdown might be different than mine. Tons of people are still working, but true, 30 million people are unemployment now because of the way this was handled on the national level.
I understand whose fault you think it is. Right, I get it. But from, going back to school-age kids, we know that. And I don't think we can continually go down this road of looking at anecdotal stories or thinking about what could happen. And that's what I'm seeing now. I'm seeing, here's data. There's no reason why, businesses shouldn't be up and running, following CDC guidelines. We could have done this safely a long time ago. Let people, if you have pre-existing conditions, we protect those people. We protect the nursing homes. Let kids go back to school. Let them have a life. Let them play sport. We're causing irreversible damage, according to behavioral health experts and mental health experts.
Well, it is an awful pandemic. So, to have everyone come out unscathed isn't reasonable. But how?
So at what cost? Right?
How do you get a kindergartner to keep their mask on? Seriously.
Okay. You don't have any data that a kindergartner that's asymptomatic is spreading this. There's not a case in the world of a child giving this to a teacher. So I get it. You can make the argument that, hey, it might happen. This could be bad.
There are teachers that have died. And part of the problem, I am very grateful that my kids, I have 2 kids, they are young adults, and I don't have to make these decisions. But there are parents that have to go to work, and their kids have to be at a school or they can't go to work. So we need to allow a safe way for those kids to go, while those who are privileged enough to be able to work from home, or their kids are self-sufficient enough to be able to school from home without supervision, do so. But there's not an all or nothing here. I think the pandemic and the economy cannot be looked at as an either or. It's a both and. They're intertwined intimately.
So I would ask, when would it be safe?
When would it be safe?
When's it going to be safe?
We have to come up with our own metrics. I know for DuPage County and for Illinois, there are percentage metrics on death, and that's what they're using based on the medical advice they're getting. Personally, I want 100% mask compliance. Of course, that's not going to happen.
Let me ask you this. Do you think the people who want to more aggressively reopen or reopen faster are the same people who are against wearing masks? What do you see in the community?
Absolutely.
Of course.
So the same people who don't want to wear masks are the same ones who want to reopen sooner.
But I wear a mask everywhere I go. I want to open up.
Yeah,
Okay, it
well
doesn't
then
mean
that's
that-
different, yeah.
right? So, yeah, people that object. I do think that there is an underappreciated, and you mentioned that our country's different. We can't tell people what to do. And people are going to say, you can't tell them. My wife was right from the beginning. She's always right. So I'm going to make her watch this. But
His wife is always right.
from the beginning.
It is
Emily,
now
do you hear this?
officially immortalized. So.
Right? I'm like, that's not going to happen. She's like, and I remember her saying, they're going to do shelter and stay. I said, what are you talking? I don't even know what you're talking about. I don't even know what that means. They're going to make us stay in our home. And I said, who's going to make me stay in my home?
Nobody's going to tell you what to do.
It was such a foreign object that someone, like, who is going to make me stay in my house? And I think that's an underappreciated, ingrained part of our culture that, especially in Illinois, when you have politicians and you start to see the contradictions of what they do. You know, gyms can't be open, but we can have gyms at a government building for politicians. People start to see those things, and they get more and more cynical, and they get more distrusting, to the point where it's the same thing with the data. It's like, well, I'm not going to believe these people anymore.
Well, again, I'm hearing black and white thinking. Stay at home, for me, there hasn't been a day where I don't go out somewhere. Do I go indoors to an air-conditioned place for several hours and talk to someone this close? No. But every single day, I'm outside. I'm exercising outside. We've had social gatherings outside with groups of people sitting 6 feet apart. I like it 10 feet. My husband keeps scooching those chairs closer. We all wear masks. We make a limit. We don't have shared utensils. It's been lovely. We've seen tons of friends that way. You asked earlier, how long do we do this? We don't get out of this situation until we either get herd immunity or a vaccine, or vaccine helps us get to herd immunity. If we do herd immunity without a vaccine, we are going to see millions of people dying. If we wait for the vaccine, we are still going to be in this a long time because there are people who are against taking a vaccine. If they don't trust the administration, let's say a vaccine is rushed through before Election Day for political reasons, they're not going to take the vaccine. So how long it's not forever. This is a temporary situation. How long it will be depends on factors out of our control.
So Karen, what do you think is the greatest lasting impact in terms of negative impact, meaning businesses, children? You had a long list of things that are being impacted. What do you think is going to have the longest negative impact that we're going to see for years to come?
I think the kids who are going through this are going to have a different adulthood than we did. They are going through a once-in-a-100-year crisis, and it will affect how they deal with things in the future. I don't know what that's going to look like. My crystal ball is dusty. I think the economy is going to take decades to repair. We had a 32.9% drop in GDP. That's a record drop. This is a big, big problem. But when we say lockdown, not everything is closed. Many people are still working. Yes, many people are losing their jobs, and we have to find a way to use the resources we have to get people back to work, to get mental health services to those kids and adults who are suffering.
With the herd immunity, in order for that to take effect, many people will have to be infected and survive. How do you think that impacts the communities of people who are most vulnerable? People of color,
the herd immunity thing
elderly?
is interesting. I look at that and from the beginning, I'm like, I think, young and healthy people need to get this. We got to stop the virus. And that's what we're told, right? We were told everyone's going to get this. Everyone's going to be exposed to it.
I disagree with that, though.
Well, that's what we were told by the CDC and every politician, right? We need to save the healthcare system. That was the goal, right? You flatten the curve.
When
right?
it started, yeah, that was the messaging that we were
curve.
receiving.
And so to me, that was like, well, then, okay, we'll all eventually be exposed to this and herd immunity will be created. But then the conversation changed. It went from flattening the curve to never getting sick ever again. We're not allowed to get sick. But the herd immunity thing, when I talk about that, and it's like, hey, it's an interesting thing. Maybe that's the way to go. And you get attacked. And it's usually from it's interesting. People's politics affect how they feel about this virus. And if you're on one side of the political spectrum, you're going to say herd immunity is not the right way to go. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I don't know. But isn't, and I'm not a scientist, I'm not a doctor, isn't a vaccine herd immunity, right? So I hear herd immunity doesn't work. We're seeing reports that the antibodies don't stay a long time in the system. But we need to get this vaccine, right? So somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not an expert on this, but I keep hearing we're not sure. There's a big risk. Herd immunity is not the path, that we don't keep these antibodies and we're going to get infected twice. But the same people are saying we need to wait for a vaccine. So that's a little bit of...
Some of it's semantics. When I hear herd immunity out in the press, what they're talking about is doing nothing and letting nature take its course. So whoever dies, dies, and whoever survives, survives. And in that model, we're talking about 1 million or more deaths in this country by the time this is over. A vaccine...
Maybe. We don't know that. Right?
Based on previous data, yeah. I mean, you're a finance guy, I'm a word gal, but...
Right, but we're going back to, hey, this is what could happen.
No, it's
right?
already happened. We've seen the percentages of people who died before we started
and you know
mitigating.
that 1 million people would die.
I'm not going to put that in writing, but...
Do you think people underestimate the impact on the body of the coronavirus? Because I think a lot of times there are people who are healthy, who get infected. They're not hospitalized. Their symptoms are relatively mild, but they're discovering that, kind of some of the long-term effects, there's lung damage, there's organ damage. Do you think we underestimate that to the point where we don't value or appreciate the mask wearing like we should?
Well, again, all I do is I look at data and I scratch my head and wonder why we're doing these things. I hear those same stories. I'm not saying they're not real, but they're definitely anecdotal. And I don't think we continue to make decisions based on anecdotal or stories or something our friend gave us with a headline.
This is a novel coronavirus. I have a friend who's a marathoner. She after it took her 100 days to get out of symptoms, she was able to run a block, and then 2 blocks. She's working her way back up. She was really, really ill. This is a fit, younger person. She was not even in her 40s. Over time, we're not going to just have anecdotal data. We're going to have bigger numbers because we will have studied this longer.
But again, I'm basing on what we do have, and I'm hearing we're going to have this data. Will we? I don't know. We were supposed to lose 2 million people in the country. I mean, some of the predictions, Lori Lightfoot, do you remember her saying that we're going to have 40,000 acute patients within the next 2 weeks in Cook County Hospital? No one ever goes back and says, did that happen? And if they did, they could say, well, that's because we shut everything down. So the argument is, here's all the bad things that can happen. And then when they don't happen, well, that's because we did all these things. Unfortunately for that argument, there's just a lot of evidence of different states that didn't do the things that like a state of Illinois did, and they didn't suffer the deaths. They were no worse with the coronavirus. And we've got kids that have been going to school in Europe since the spring and without any outbreaks.
I don't think you can compare these apples to apples. You're talking about different circumstances. Some countries had full mask right. compliance. Some countries like China, you can't walk into a building without getting your temperature taken. And if you have
they know where you're going.
And know where
they
you're
also
going.
Know where they're tracking your movements.
Right. That's the other thing we need to have in this country until we can get out of this, is a nationwide testing, tracing, and isolation program. Because, and our testing is way
of everyone
below.
Test everyone?
Well, I think we can learn some lessons from some of the things that happened in Asia, because they've been through this before. This is not their first pandemic breakout. And I think they learned some serious lessons, because they were like, we're not going to do this again. They had a task force that was empowered, that provided the leadership, I think, that was mentioned by Karen earlier, to take action. I do think that we waited too long to take action. Whatever that action was, there were too many competing interests at the top for like what you said, political reasons. I think we needed a group of people that was apolitical, where politics weren't necessarily involved, but it was medical professionals, healthcare folks who were experts in this, who don't have a dog in this fight. Besides, I don't want to work 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, because I'm essential. That being the driving force.
I'm not here to defend the president. I mean, the guy's terrible,
we know.
Right? But you can't pin this on him. No one would have done anything different. And in this country, you're not going to shut the United States down. right? And he did things early, and he was
And we
called
never
terrible
have shut
for,
the United States down. Tons of businesses are still operating.
But I don't know what you're suggesting.
I think some of this
Testing
language of
every-
shutdown and lockdown, these are very polarizing words. I know people who have never stopped working. They have been working the entire time. They're just doing it in a different way. They're doing it virtually. The people who are at most risk in that situation are the people who have the least privilege. So a pandemic is going to it's going to press
Right?
it's going to press
Who's
on,
winning?
It's going to
Privileged people?
It's going to
Walmart? Big tech? I don't mean to
It's going to
interrupt, but-
press on the society, and what's going to bulge out are the areas of weakness. So in our country, it's disparities in healthcare, which is why African Americans are disproportionately affected. It's disparity in who works the most dangerous jobs in this country, like the meatpacking plants, or I'm trying to think of another organization where there's been huge spikes. You know, it's minorities. So yeah, absolutely, the privileged people are able to keep working, and this is mostly harming people who are less well affluent.
We agree on that.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, I will say that this has been an incredibly lively conversation, which we so appreciate both of your perspectives as community members in Naperville. And I'm so glad that we were able to explore what's happening nationwide as well as in Illinois, because Naperville is a part of all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that I'm glad that we could find that little bit of common ground. So thank you so much for joining us on this episode. We hope you'll join us again.